Can you introduce us to your character and tell us a little bit about who they are?
Krezixx.
Krezixx.
Krezixx Kell. Yeah, we can go with that. That's a good one. A little bit of a background of that character. He is, that's it's a tricky one to explain. It's a very custom world, so not any sort of like standard campaign setting, which might make some of the names and faces a little bit strange. In fact, some of the names might be very familiar because our DM at the time was rather pop culture illiterate. And when he asked another player for a bunch of names, he didn't know he was getting actual names.
Ah,
Uh, but Krezixx comes from a town in Naples. He was born there, raised there. I wouldn't exactly call him a lowly commoner, but I also wouldn't call him nobility. Just enough to think himself above others, but nowhere near enough to be respected by the nobles around him. In that regard, Krezixx earned his keep and got to where he was, becoming a wizard by anybody, by the same way anybody in that sort of situation has to. And that's through diligence, work, a lot of study. He eventually had dreams of becoming the archmage for the king of that specific region. Krezixx really didn't know his family that well. As soon as he showed an aptitude for magic, he was sent off to school. And, well, they died before he could see them again. Nothing outrageous, no sort of traumatic event that led to their death. They just passed away.
so how did you come up with the idea for your character? And did you draw any inspiration from any particular sources or experiences?
Definitely some sources. Um, as a kid of the right age, I was obsessed with the Disney movie Aladdin, and
Always a good one.
specifically the character Jafar. And I'm sure as we talk about this character, a lot of that inspiration will come through. But it was actually a lot of different sources of inspiration. It was the second D&D character I ever made. The first one that I made went nowhere. The only thing I liked about him was his class. I didn't understand the game or how it was played, but once I played a little bit, I'm like, oh, okay, there's characters here, there's stories here, and I really like stories. So I was like, see if I could tell one. And a lot of people, they'll that we were playing with, they would fill up their backstory, not realizing like that's their entire story that you just wrote for them. And I wanted to leave this one a little bit of a room. I was like, I can have an arc while playing. So I sort of started to think about that arc for myself. The inspiration largely came from just evil, real world evil, Disney evil, everything in between. I kind of wanted to know, like, wow, how does evil tick? How does someone become this? And usually it's if you read anything, if you look at any sort of like fantasy literature, evil is highly motivated, motivated by something, motivated by some sort of goal. And I wanted him to be motivated by a lust for power, and not just any sort of power, but the power of station, his own elevation. And since they're so motivated, I wanted to have a character that sort of did that through his own will.
So, speaking about your character, what are some of your character's strengths and weaknesses, and how did they impact the way that you play the game?
Oh, quite a few. His strengths were his meticulous organization. His weakness was his meticulous organization. And the same thing, sort of like a double-edged sword. He's the kind of guy who has everything planned out. But if it doesn't go according to plan, he gets very stressed about it. It becomes a problem for him. He fixates on it. His sort of meticulous attention to detail becomes obsession throughout the course of this character. His other weaknesses were his own pride, his blindness in certain areas, why he was as good as he was, how was he this kind of sort of savant at magic, to the point where, spoiler alerts later on in the campaign, he becomes one of the three most powerful wizards in the world.
Oh, nice.
Uh, and some of that manifests itself, and this is where like a lot of the real world inspirations come from, is that he doesn't just view his success through the lens of his own hard work, but he views others' success or others' lack of success, if you will, through that same lens without realizing, much like I said, he wasn't a commoner. His parents had the power to send him to an academy when he showed interest in something a farmer's not going to get. But he didn't care. He didn't see that any differently. And on the flip side, one of his biggest weaknesses, he did not like those who came to power easily. He thought if you didn't work for it, you didn't deserve it. And that led to his extreme racism and hatred towards elves.
Long living species, definitely easy for them to take the time.
Well, especially with magic, I had to earn every little bit that I understand. My knowledge came from my study. For you, it just seems innate. Why? Why is that even fair to someone like me? Once again, blindness. He doesn't understand why the farmer's plight isn't fair to them compared to him.
Yeah. How does your character fit into the larger story or campaign, and what motivates them to be a part of an adventure?
Well, obviously, the lust for power, to gain more, was a massive part of the adventure. He wanted to please the king at first, and that led to his very first adventure with who would become both his best friend and his most hated enemy. And that would be Rico, who was a elf ranger. The two of them had rescued the princess, who actually gained an infatuation for Krezixx, one that was never returned. He didn't care for anything other than himself. Through that, they managed to gain a foothold in a small sort of pit of land outside of Naples, a sort of untouched part of nature, beautiful, resource rich, but kind of difficult to find its way around and find its way in. It's not flat terrain. A lot of it's rocky. It does have pools and rivers, but a lot of these are waterfalls and rapids. It's not the kind of place you can easily sort of come in and extract from. So the King of Naples had no trouble giving it to them. They ended up calling this Lost Ends, which we always thought was a hilarious name. And that's actually what led to the strife between him and Rico, other than Krezix's absolute and unabashed racism towards him. Like it was from the start. As the greater story at large involved a dark god wanting to come back to the plane. And this dark god was called Loki. Once again, culturally illiterate GM. He had no idea the names he was being given. Uh, this dark god, like any good sort of evil plotter, including Krezixx himself, knew that there were stones he had to put in place. There were things he had to get done beforehand. And some of his earlier ventures were thwarted by Krezixx and Rico and the people of Lost Ends. The adventure was sort of driven by those who followed us. Um, if this was Dragon Ball Z, we're the Goku and Vegeta of the series to include our relationship with one another. It was further driven by once we stopped his plans once, it was we weren't just in the way of his plans, we became part of his plans. A sort of list he eventually had of people that need to go before I can finish what I need to finish. And Krezixx was right near the top of that list. So even in later times, when Krezixx had his power, when he had his had almost everything he wanted, now he's on the shit list of a dark deity. That's pretty motivating to want to stay alive, even to maintain your power. Uh,
Well, it sounds like he's had a pretty amazing career. Have there been any particularly memorable moments or challenges that your character has faced during gameplay?
I'd say the greatest challenge by far throughout the course of Krezix's life was Rico, the Elf Ranger. Very much so. If Rico was not in that group, that would just be a group of people doing Krezix's bidding, whether they intended to or not. He was the one who sort of kept people in line, warned people about me. In fact, a floating tower. This is another memorable moment. We were arguing over who's allowed on this land and who isn't. Rico normally had a very open policy as to who's allowed on the land, and I tolerated the elves that were with him so much as they didn't go on my stuff. Rico didn't so much tolerate Krezix's company. He was a lust for power, lust for knowledge. And when this got in the way with devils showing up because I wanted to learn from them was the final straw, but it was the final straw of many, many different creatures. I didn't care where they came from. If they knew magic, I wanted to learn from them. He didn't like me consorting with these creatures on his land, which hard to blame him from an outside perspective. From an inside perspective, I was robbed. I was cheated. I can't believe he thought he would tell me what to do on our land. So I ripped my tower up from over the ground and said, I'm not on your land anymore. My floating tower is just above it. And that was a pretty memorable moment that caused a lot of strife throughout the campaign between us because I didn't leave. That shadow of my tower was ever over Lost Ends. Another memorable moment, one of my favorites, an army of goblins of all shapes and stripes. We're talking from the stereotypical to some pretty ingenious ideas for how these goblins would act, are absolutely approaching us. All sides. They want Lost Ends for themselves, and more importantly, they don't want Rico to continue expanding his troop of druids and rangers, his moon pools, sanctifying the ground beneath him and spreading the sort of goodness, quote unquote, of nature. And they were also sent by the Dark God, given our location. Everybody's preparing. People are shitting bricks. All Krezixx does is he walks outside of his tower, looks at one of the goblins, points at him, casts a spell called Azure Flame. Azure Flame is a spell that engulfs you in blue flame. Now, mind you, this is an older edition, kids. This is not going to be in your current D&D. What it does is it engulfs that person in a blue flame. This was no saving throw. It just happened to you. If you touch another creature, you engulf them in that same flame. This flame can't be put out by water. It can be put out by dispel magic, but you have to be a certain level in order to dispel my magic. So with that one shot, the blue fire starts spreading throughout the entire goblin army, and I just turn around and walk back to my tower. I've got studying to do. Very much so a cool guys don't look at explosions moment.
Nice.
Um, there was a memorable moment of Krezixx when we first got into the Hells to take on this Dark God. A lot of us lost. Rico escaped. Of course he did. He's slippery. I hate him. Um, a lot of them didn't. And I was one of those people who didn't escape, but the Dark God didn't feel comfortable holding me as I was, so I was kept as nothing but an eyeball to sit and watch for decades as the remainder of, what he thought were my friends being tortured, but I don't have friends. I have accomplices at best, with one exception. Um, Another great moment. He has so many. It was a long-lived character.
Well, talking about the longevity of the character, how did that character evolve over the course of the game, and have they changed in any significant ways?
Whoa. Um, some would say I became more evil, and that's easily true. Like I definitely gained the small little connection I had to humanity and the empathy I felt for other people disappeared over time. Through the rivalry with Rico, however, I gained what's probably my only true friend. Um, he gained the power he wanted, but over time he also gained the wisdom to sort of realize that this power is an unattainable goal. Even when you reach one, there's a new horizon beyond it. And he became cognizant of this. And so he was always looking for, well, how do I find a way to become pleased instead of with the power, instead of just become powerful over time? With any good evil character, especially one this motivated, the end is never that great. But by far the biggest change for the character was his burgeoning friendship with Rico. To the point where Rico, when he was on his deathbed, because Krezixx outlived him, gotta love magic. When Rico was on his deathbed, and this didn't happen in game, but the DM had approached me about writing a book about the future of that campaign setting. And me and the character who played me and the person who played Rigo kind of came up with this like ending scene, like how would this conversation really go between Rico and probably his greatest enemy, and vice versa, Krezixx and his greatest enemy. And on his deathbed, Rico would say, "You have nothing now, and yet you have everything. All the power you wanted, and it's for naught. You've managed to live longer than you've ever dreamed. But look, you have nothing. Everything's gone. You have no friends, no family." And very sternly, Krezixx looks at him and says, "Almost." Sort of a silent, well, a verbal, but an implied acknowledgement, "You are my friend." He respected him through the rivalry, and that respect through Rico started to bleed out to others. He started to gain a respect for the way things were. And even kind of got over his racism of elves a little bit, if you could call having that one black friend getting over your racism.
So you've talked about how Rico was a close friend to Krezix. Were there any other characters in the game that your character developed any sort of close relationship with? And if so, did those relationships evolve in any ways?
No, I wouldn't say they evolved as much as it was just gained a respect for a few others. I mentioned Krezix and Rico as being the sort of leaders of this town. There was a third one named Scythe, a lizard creature, who gathered treasure, not for monetary value, just because he thought it was pretty. He would do assassinations, and honestly, if your little trinket was worth nothing monetarily, but it caught his eye, he'd probably try to kill a god for you. He did understand the meaning of money, though, and like how much certain things were worth. Not to say he's an imbecile in that way. He wasn't, but he was more interested in what he liked. Um, this creature, this lizard creature, could stab you in the neck, and if he managed to get you in the neck with his finger, that's it. Your head's gonna explode. That is just your fate. That is how this is gonna go. He had a magic item in his treasure hoard that was a sword that just called to you if you saw it. You have no choice but to go and try to grab it. But if you grab it, you become just another piece of treasure in the treasure hoard.
Ooh.
And he didn't know it did that. He just liked the sword. Like there were some ways where, yeah, a lot of the stuff he didn't know how valuable it was. It was valuable to him. And he kind of gained a respect for that, the sort of single-mindedness. With the other characters, the remainder of them, uh, Krezixx sort of saw his tools, and that almost never went away. But if you lived long enough with him on a few adventures, he would see you less as a tool and more of sort of an associate, somebody he could at least trust and rely on. He wouldn't have to stand over your shoulder. He was a hard sell. So there weren't a lot of relationships that changed with him over time.
What did you enjoy most about playing this character, and how has playing them impacted your life overall?
I enjoyed playing them because of the rivalry with Rico, like by far the most. It lasted from the start of the campaign to the end of it.
How long was that in like real world years?
Probably 1 to 2 years.
That's pretty good.
Over the course of this campaign, me and the person who played it, when I first came to the group, we hated each other. I'm not even like, we just did not like each other. We didn't get along. Through the course of playing this game, actually, he's one of my closest friends now. Like, we just started to become closer and closer. One, because well, he liked the way I played. I liked the way he played. I'm like, oh, this is still fun. Like we started to realize like my character's not fun without yours. A couple times we just sort of accidentally ended up hanging out without anyone else there. Spawned out through this, which, funny enough, a little bit of a real world story here that culminated in me riding the bus to his school with the rest of them. I didn't go to their school. I was the only one in a D&D group who didn't. So I rode the bus to their school because my school was off that day. And the officer in the school um, eventually found me on my way out, not my way in. I went in. It was to get a girl's number. That's right. Girl's number that I had lost. And on my way out, uh, the school officer caught me. My school didn't have them, so I wasn't prepared for this. And he caught me and he's like, "Where do you think you're going?" And I'm like, "Home? I don't go here." He's like, "Oh, you're trespassing." Gets me going. He wants to know because they think I'm running some sort of like drug ring at this high school at this point. They're like, "Who'd you come with?" And I didn't want to get any of the people I liked in trouble, so I gave them his name. And there was a weird respect he had for that as well. Like, oh, okay, I'd give your name too. It's what I would do. He thought the idea was hilarious. Plus, like him being taken out by the cops to hush hush have to talk to them made him look badass in front of the class for like a moment. So like after that, us talking about it, just instant friends from that point on. And I wouldn't say instant because like I said, we hated each other for a while. But yeah, easily one of the longest and closest friendships I have to this day was built because of that character
Oh, that's
and
so awesome.
a trip to the cops.
Can you walk us through a recent or particularly exciting gameplay experience that that character was involved in?
Mm. I could give you a recent one. It wasn't very exciting. Um, I played this character. I gotta do math. 25 years ago. So as you can imagine, there's not a lot of recent pop-ups of him.
Yeah.
Um, but we did try again. Somebody I know who DMs like, hey, we'll throw this character in there if you want to play him. Because I was thinking about using him, and I was like, if you're gonna use him, I'm gonna play him. Um, it just wasn't the campaign for me or that person. I was there for a session. That was about it. So no, not really.
So we talked about that. Would there be any future plans for that character? And if so, if you could pull it off, what would you hope to achieve with them in those future gameplay sessions?
Well, I had recently spoken to that same group that played, and I thought like, hey guys, we could use this same campaign setting, but for like a pass the DM sort of gameplay style, like we've all been playing for a long time. And I could probably use him in that if we ended up doing that. At this point, he would be one of the few ways. How would I use him? Either there's the obvious, like he's a big bad, right? Someone who comes up, a powerful wizard who has ancient spells that no one even knows about anymore, who has spent his time trapped in his own device, studying, learning, and creating new magics. Um, but that in that same regard, I'd probably more prefer to use him as a stepping stone to something else. Perhaps an unsolvable riddle, a location that you can't find, um, a sort of magic puzzle that's impossible to solve.
You
You
would
would
make
need
him
to
like
find him.
you'd make him like a badass MacGuffin.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, like a badass MacGuffin, or at least like somebody who can lead them in the right direction. Because I'd rather have the players solve something like that. But like more like here's a person who has the missing piece of information you would need. He's the only one who could possibly have it, kind of thing.
And that's such a good way to call back to a character that you enjoy, that you've got such like a wealth of knowledge of.
Yeah, yeah, sure is. Because I just enjoy doing stuff like that anyway. I mean, if I'm going to be like running a game, um, I mean, a lot of the times my big bad isn't like the biggest or baddest. He's different. He has something else he's trying to pull off. Even if you look at the to grand sum total of what he's trying to do, it might not even sound that bad. And I would actually say that tendency to make characters like that, that comes from that character. Like I said, examining and learning how to play evil.
Yeah, given that human element, it started off like the road to hell is paved with the best of intentions.
Yeah. I hate to be cliche and say like every villain is the hero of his own story, because I don't like necessarily believe that. But they still have, like I said, they have motivations. They don't just bad to bad. They
Yeah,
bad for a reason. Usually the bad is the means, not the end, you know? Like I have to think about it like even your most heartless bank robber is not robbing a bank just to say he did it, just to have robbed the bank. That's usually not the goal. It's usually a means to an end.
yeah. I think that's something that everybody could kind of take away as a lesson. You don't have to be evil just to be evil, but find what you want and then accomplish it through selfish means, subtle manipulation, motivating other people, carrot and the stick.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, Krezixx is just somebody who wanted to earn his station through hard work. In a way, that's endearing. It just so happens that he's not afraid to step on people to do it.
Yeah.
Um, I don't like the phrase every villain is a hero of his own story, but I absolutely love the phrase, the quote from Star Trek, Jean-Luc Picard, not all villains twirl their mustaches.
I remember hearing that a lot. Like, this is not a mustache twirling villain. This is not your vaudeville. I'm gonna
Yeah,
strap the
I
lady to the railroad tracks and watch her get run over type of stuff.
I love that quote. Most of my good character ideas come from inspirational quotes from Jean-Luc Picard, everybody's TV dad.
It's good to have this inspiration. It's good to be able to take these things out of popular culture. Because as soon as you said, Jafar from Aladdin, I was like, oh man, that's awesome. Like,
Yeah, I even had the snake staff. I was obsessed with that snake staff. I had to have that part.
Well, and I mean, in second edition, there was a staff of stick to snakes, you know?
Yep. It was I wanted it to shift to snakes. Holding it helped me control lightning. I couldn't create it, but I can control it. So if you're throwing lightning spells at me, haha, no, no thanks. I don't want that. And then, of course, hypnotize.
Oh, yeah.
You gotta have that part. It's the coolest part. I didn't even want the snake to become a snake to like, oh, have, I'm sorry, to be like, ooh, have my snake do damage. I really did just want to do the cool part where its eyes go weird and then the snake kind of moves at the top of its head, right? Like I was really more into effects like that once because I was a big pro wrestling fan even then. Like once I learned that you could do dramatic shit with flair in this game, I was sold.
Oh, yeah.
I was sold. Sometimes a cool promo is just a cool promo.
And not only that, but other people see it and they're like, "Oh wow, I'm going to start like flavor texting my attacks or like my abilities."
Well, yeah, it's flavor text. A lot of people think it's like, oh, it's flavor text. It's just extra. I'm like, oh, you eat bland food and tell me if flavor is just extra.
Yeah. Well, that's it for our structured questions. Is there anything that you want to talk about?
With this character,
Yeah.
ooh, well, obviously we just talked a bunch, talked about the staff. Now I love that. I won't lie, the device that I captured myself in, um, was a D&D Pokeball. That's what I intended it to be. I was initially intending to capture a very powerful creature we had found in it. Um, but I decided to eventually trap myself in it. A part of the lazy keywords of it is that you have to be me to command the creature. So it's not like someone's going to pull out the Pokeball and be like, "Oh, Krezixx is in this. I choose you." And it's like, "Nah, you choose me. You're going to choose your demise. That's what's going to happen to you."
Yeah.
I mean, no, I think we largely went over it. Like a lot of just a lot of the cool stuff and the things I liked about that character. You know what I mean? Like it's not nowhere did I say he went through burning villages. He went through, you know what I mean? Like it's I wouldn't call it subtle evil. I just wouldn't call it outlandish. Like I said, he never did evil for evil's sake. Um, and me and Rico had 3 fights, I believe, total throughout the course of the campaign versus each other. Usually when I stepped out of line,
Yeah.
as an evil character is prone to do. And I'm ashamed to admit this, but he won all 3 of them.
Oh.
All
Well,
3 of them.
you said what, second edition?
Yeah. Second
Oh,
edition Ranger, peak Ranger. But I was a second edition wizard, so we're also talking like peak wizard. They were
yeah.
spectacles. They were pure spectacles, but he was Ranger until he maxed it out for Elf. That's right, kids. You could do that. You could max out your class for your specific race. And then added Rogue to it because why not? Why not just be a thorn in my side? This is the other
Can't
thing.
hit what you
Krezixx
can't
hated
see.
rogues. You know, when you hoard power, you kind of fear people who can take it.
Yeah.
That was always a big trait I would play with my wizards. Like, I don't like rogues. Why? Well, I got this thing, the spell book, and so I don't like people who steal.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did eventually become nobility, Lord Krezixx Kell. Never quite king like he wanted, never archmage. And this is I'll end it on this story, man. So this is one of I hated it at the time, but it's one of the funniest ones when I look back at it. There was this bear that was mildly intelligent that Rico really wanted to like train and befriend and become a companion. He didn't though. The bear showed an affinity for magic, so he became my apprentice. And he actually learned a few spells. His name was Rargo. And eventually Rargo the Archmage Bear, because the bear completed my dream for me. But people would always go around in town before I gained a little bit more prominence. They'd be like, "Oh, look, it's Rargo, the Archmage Bear, and his apprentice Krezixx," and that would drive me up a wall. That would drive me up a wall. What a bear, though. He was probably one of the major reasons me and Rico didn't kill each other either, because he loved us both.
Oh,
Kind of the DM's smart way of being like, I don't want you guys to kill each other. Like,
yeah. Think about the bear.
yeah. And a lot of times, like the times the bear stepped in between me and him, and I'm like, okay, all right, I'm not gonna hurt Rargo. And
Yeah,
there were
because
times that,
yeah, because you said again, like Krezixx wasn't mustache twirling evil.
no,
He genuinely cared. He's
oh, he
just
loved this
more
bear.
self motivated. Yeah.
He loved this bear. They both did. And there was a time where Krezixx might have stepped over line, the moon pools that I had mentioned before. Um, when I first returned from hell, I disenchanted all the moon pools in Lost Ends and then cast a spell that caused all vegetation within a mile radius to go away and nothing can grow back for a year. So I might have started that one. And yeah, he's Rico killed me in one attack.
Oh wow.
Yeah, sneak attack. Because he had his levels of rogue at that point. Like we were high level. I was an 18th level wizard at that point. He killed me in one attack.
And this is when like you could get multiple levels in multiple classes. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
And I had clones and whatnot. It was unnecessary. At least I thought it was unnecessary being resurrected. But Rico had ways of stopping that.
Hmm.
And so, in which he did. He didn't want me back after that. He was like, no, I think you've crossed the line at this point. Um, that's one of the few moments I actually did the mustache twirling evil. And it was less mustache twirling evil and more, fuck you, Rico. Like, Lost Ends is mine now. You have no need for it. Uh, but Rargo was the one who resurrected him
Ah.
and brought him back and stopped us from going at it again. He was even told us like, you got a lucky sneak attack. Now I'm looking at you. Do it again. Yeah, that would Rargo the Archmage Bear. What a
Oh,
guy.
that's awesome. And I've
That's
never heard that we've been friends for a while, man. Like
never heard about Rargo the
never
Archmage
heard
Bear.
about Rargo.
No, that's how
14
long it's
years
pissed
of
me
playing.
off. That is how long that pissed me off. I'm not gonna lie. Like, there goes Rargo, the Archmage Bear, and his apprentice Krezixx.
A little bit of therapy.
But yeah, that's Rargo. That's Krezixx.
Nice.
Really, you didn't know. I was telling the story of Rargo this whole time. I was just leading up this all backstory.
Uh,
That's
good
my favorite part.
times.
Never stopped us with words because he couldn't speak except little magical incantations. So he couldn't like tell us to not fight. But we knew. He looked at us, riding on, walking on his little ball, giving us those puppy dog eyes. Can't fight around Rargo. It'll make him sad. Plus, low key at the end, I didn't know if Rargo was more powerful or not.
Oh,
We kind of had it confirmed he wasn't when they told us the three most powerful mages in the land. I was number three. And you would think it's like, oh, you're the third most powerful. That's great. No, the DM knew that would irk me.
ah.
That would definitely. I went after the second most powerful. Got him to run away. So like, is he really the second most?
Debatable at that point.
Hit him with that power word liquefy. Or at least I almost did, but he was like, nope, I'm out. And then the most powerful just died of old age. Sucker.
So then I would argue. that given that train of logic, you beat the second, outlasted the first.
Oh, at the end, definitely. At the very end, I was the most powerful wizard.
Yep.
You know, it's kind of an achievement when you land at the top of a shit list of the most powerful dark deity, the leader of the Dead Moon, which was actually the name of the campaign setting, the Dead Moon.
Oh, cool.
It was cool stuff. But that's about all I got on him.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that, man. It was great to hear you talk about one of your favorite characters.
No problem. I enjoyed talking about him to the point where even if me or Buddy Joe, or Nick, who played Rico, Joe played Scythe, when we get together, that's what we talk about. We talk about that campaign.
I know those feelings because, like I've got people that I've played with, and, it's kind of like the shorthand. This is what I like about role playing. It's a collaborative effort. So it's like your choices, their choices, what happens, what went good, what went bad. It's basically like everybody's coming together to like make this thing that's completely unique.
Oh yeah, I know. There's moments where I could talk to you and just I'll just drop the name Star Wars and be like, "Nah, I'm about to hear about my campaigns. Let's go."